By the time the Somme offensive began, the Great War had already raged for almost 2 years as the imperial armies of Germany, Austria and the Ottoman Empire fought those of Russia, France and Britain. After an initial German advance into France had been halted in 1914, deadlock ensued. Trenches were dug across 450 miles of the western front of Europe. In the spring and early summer of 1916, British and French military planners targeted the valley of the River Somme in northern France as the place for a massive Allied offensive that they hoped would smash through the German lines and lead to decisive victory. The attack began 100 years ago today. At 7:30 on a warm July morning, tens of thousands of British and French soldiers began walking into no man's land and into a battle of unimaginable bloodshed. They expected little, if any, resistance. They didn't realise that an unprecedented bombardment of German lines had failed. As they advanced towards the enemy lines, they were met with fierce resistance and deadly machine gun and artillery fire. Instead of walking towards undefended positions, many were walking towards certain death.
On the 1st of July, they went on and on and on. And then the Germans, they come up behind you, see with some machine guns and rifles, and they were popping our people up from behind. Those men had to go across that open space in broad daylight, and they could have been pretty well half over if it had been a dawn attack.
By the end of the day, the British forces alone had suffered almost 60,000 casualties, 20,000 of whom were killed. These were the biggest losses ever suffered by the British Army in a single day. In comparison, the German casualties were estimated to be about 8,000. Among the huge British losses were casualties from the predominantly Protestant and Unionist 36th Ulster Division. Although it was one of the few British Army units to achieve its initial objectives, the 36th Ulster Division lost 5,500 men to death or injury over the first 2 days of the Somme offensive. Despite being told there would be no German resistance, they actually had little chance of surviving.
There's absolutely no opposition. You're just going to be a real walkover. And all the words you were to walk, you weren't to run, don't you know? Eventually, when we went, our turn to come for the good of the trenches, the first 2 lots, they were lying dead in the trench. All you had to do was stomp over them, don't you know? Walk over the dead and the wounded in the trench. So 13th platoon went over, and we got about 30 yards when a Jack Johnson busted above us and wiped the whole thing nearly out. Killed and wounded the whole thing nearly. And that's about 30 yards on no man's land.
Part of the effort was to attack the Germans and break through. And for this purpose, amongst others, they put in the 36th Ulster Division on the 1st of July. Well, this division was massacred, as were most of the others who went out into open territory that had been covered for months by the Germans and who had set their machine guns and who had heavy artillery had not been silenced by the British artillery. So that the casualties, and granted the 36th Division fought gallantly and bravely and captured much territory, but couldn't sustain it.
The Somme campaign dragged on through the summer and autumn of 1916. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers' lives were sacrificed on both sides, but the front lines barely moved. In September, the 16th Irish Division, recruited largely from Leinster, Connacht and Munster, fought in their thousands at Guillemont and nearby Ginchy. The division succeeded in taking both villages, which were heavily fortified German positions. There were more than 4,300 Irish casualties, including about 1,200 dead.
As the lads got killed, you couldn't bury them right away, because if you tried to try and bury them right away, that was an easy target for the Jerrys and you'd finish up one of them. So you had to wait until the proper time when you had the real chance of saving your life to bury them. That was one thing we had to be very careful of, not to leave any wounded out. Get the wounded in, get them in somewhere where they could be, because the rats have been known to attack helpless wounded. They could be alive, but the rats would attack them.
In the 5 months of the Battle of the Somme, more than 3,500 men from the island of Ireland lost their lives. For many at the Somme, gas attacks were almost as deadly as bullets and shells.
I got gassed when my brother got killed the same day on the Somme, up in Marlincourt on the Somme. Now, when we went out, Jerry put over gas showers, and I began to get sick into my gas mask, you know. Then my eyes began to pain me, and I began to find it difficult to breathe, so I went down. Luckily, a lad came along just as I went down, and he said, "Where are you hit, mate?" So I said, "I'm not hit, I'm gassed." He said, "No wonder you're gassed, mate." He said, "There's a big piece of German shell in the metal container of your gas mask." God, I never felt so bad.
This battle of attrition petered out in the bitter cold of November. Some 6 miles had been gained by the British. It's this and other terrible figures that define the Battle of the Somme. The final toll included over 500,000 German dead and wounded, 200,000 French and 420,000 British, a total of over 1 million.